Okay, I assume you can hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, welcome to the August 25th Historical Commission meeting.
Happy to be here.
We're going to have a few items at the beginning of this meeting, and then our main agenda will be the Housing Hope application, which is actually going to planning next month. And so let's start with an introduction of the members of the commission. So I'm Steve Fox and I'm chair.
I'm Dave Ramstead and I'm a longtime member.
I'm Amy Hebe. I'm vice chair.
Patrick Hall.
Arnold Morrison.
Tom Feeney.
Jack O'Donnell.
Andrea Steffa.
So there's 7 of us, correct?
I believe there's 8, including you, Steve. This is staff, Karen Stewart.
And
Yeah, there
David
should be
Stallman
8. Yeah.
Thank you. David and Karen, do you suggest we go through the guest list, or should we do that when we go to the public comment portion? Because there's quite a large group on here.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't go to the guest list, but Dave Koenig did say he wanted to speak during the citizen comment thing up front.
Okay. All right, I'm going to get my agenda out. Here it is. So we've done our introduction of commission, and our second item is citizen comments. So at this time, citizens are allowed to speak on items that are not on the agenda. So what is on the agenda is the request from Housing Hope to amend the Norton-Grand Historic Overlay Zone boundaries at the Sequoia playfield. So if you have any other subjects that you would like to bring before the Historical Commission, now's your time to do that.
Yes, this is Dave Koenig. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Okay, can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Steve. I have provided through staff some comments on the Rethink Zoning effort that's going on, comments that Mary Cunningham put together, comments that I put together, and then there is a support email from Mark Sony on parts of those things. I'm not going to go into those things at this time because I know your time's limited, but do ask you if you review those and you agree with our comments there, that you as individuals comment to the Planning Commission on those items. What I'm going to focus on tonight is the note that came out more recently on the Historical Commission specific items. And the first one is related to public notice. The Rethink Zoning effort will eliminate the requirement to notify nearby property owners and posting of signs on property for Historical Commission meetings and actions on certain properties. I believe in an open and transparent government which keeps its citizens informed, and I think this is important to keep this notice requirement. You would still have the decision-making authority, but I think it's important that notices of what you are going to be reviewing continue as it is in the code. This is especially important at times like, we can't get together in this time of the virus, and so we have virtual meetings and decisions. We can't see, talk to each other in a room and such. And so I think, having notices is really important to people, so they're kept in mind. The other part, the next one, is that there's changes that are happening and things are moving around, but some things have been eliminated, and I'm going to focus on those. Is the purpose of the commission, which includes aesthetics and I won't read all the stuff, it's in the note, economics, education, heritage, and the subgroups of those have been removed from where I could not find them in there. So the purpose of the commission has been removed, and I think that should not be removed. There's also some definitions that have been removed, district and incentives, and those are on page 2 of my note, and I think those are important to keep those definitions included. Also under kind of the duties, or what commission there is there on, it's 2.96.40. There's some removal there. One is provide for the review of either by the commission or its staff all applications for approval, permits, and environmental assessments of impact statements and other similar documents pertaining to identified historic resources and adjacent properties. This is being removed, so it's basically saying the staff and the commission should not aren't given any direction on looking at applications, permits, environmental assessments. So that's been removed, and I don't think that should be removed. And also perform other related functions assigned to the commission by the city council and mayor. I do not think that should be removed. And then also that the commission shall adopt rules of procedure to address items above that are there. So I think the commission should still be able to adopt rules of procedures. And then changes to procedures related to historic register properties. They're taking out there's a number of things that are being taken out here, and it's hard to follow without having a legislative format. And I encourage the commission to request a legislative format so you can see what's being removed and taken out. But there was a 45-day receipt of application that the commission would try to make its recommendations within that 45 days, and that time frame has been taken out. That was originally put in there so that the historic part of review would not become the anchor or the slow up in the process for projects. It's just one of the processes within it. And so I think still having a goal of 45 days should be there. And so those are the things that I'm making recommendations on. The other one I just want to highlight is that currently when there's a demolition of an Everett register property, currently your recommendation as a commission goes to the city council in a public meeting. And that is being proposed to be changed to go to the planning director as administrative decision without a public meeting. I'm not making any recommendation on it. I just wanted to point that out to the commission to see if they had some concerns about that. My comments on this related to this would be that the commission, either as a group or as individuals, could comment to the planning commission. They're the ones that are reviewing this. I haven't followed what the historical commission involvement has been in this, so I don't know if I'm repeating things you've already heard or not. But I just wanted to, when somebody asked me to review this, and so I did over the weekend, and I drafted the note as I mentioned. And I'll stop there because I think my time's up.
Thank you,
Dave.
Yes, thank you, David. We were thinking about talking about this very subject in the commissioner and staff comments after the Housing Hope portion of this meeting. So I don't know, Dave, if you could stick around for that or dial in later. David Stahlheim, do you want to address that later, or should we do that now?
No, I think we should, we have a big topic on tonight's agenda, a lot of people in the queue here, so let's move on to the main business.
Okay.
This is Dave Koenig. I can keep you on the phone, and I'd be available after the Housing Hope thing.
Thank you, Dave Koenig. Do we have any other citizen comments? So not hearing any. If you have one, pipe in. I just want to remind everyone who's on their telephones to use *6 to toggle muting on or off. Muting is kind of handy because it gets rid of a lot of extra noise, and so we can all hear what the main speaker is trying to say. So I think we're ready to move on to our main agenda item. So I want to remind everyone that this is not a public hearing. It's a meeting. That the actual public hearing will be at the Planning Commission, which I believe is September 15th. Is that correct, David Stahlheim? Okay. And we're going to do this in several steps here. First, we're going to have a staff report by David Stahlheim. Then we'll invite Kim Williams and Elizabeth Cole from Housing Hope to explain the project for about 10 minutes. After that, we'll invite the public to comment. We'll have a maximum of 3 minutes per person. We'll have David Stahlheim call upon each person to see if they want to talk. And David's got the control of muting for everybody. So I think you have to turn on muting if you're turned off yourself. Maybe David could verify that later. So again, remember the public has 3 minutes to talk. After that, we're going to close the public comment, and the commissioners will have their opportunity to comment and ask questions of the applicants. And then I presume we'll draft some kind of a vote and decide how we want to respond to this, which will be sent to the Planning Commission. Then that would be the end of the Housing Hope portion of this meeting, and we'll go on to some other business like our commissioner and staff comments and whatnot. So with no further ado, David Stahlheim, why don't you give us your staff report?
All right, thank you, Steve. Welcome to everybody. So a couple things just up front about this application from Housing Hope. So first off, this is a quasi-judicial land use application, and what that means is it's a site-specific application. And as a result of that, folks on our Planning Commission and City Council cannot have any what's called ex parte contacts with proponents or opponents of the application outside of the public hearing process. So please make sure that, and I know several people have sent comment letters into City Council, and the response is that you're just not going to get a response from folks. Just a heads up about that. The second thing is that the public record is being built in front of the Planning Commission on this. And so sending it to both the Planning Commission, to our planning email, and to the City Council is really duplicative. So if you just send it to planning@everettwa.gov, then we build that record in front of the Planning Commission, and then that all goes to the City Council. Every one of you have sent in emails or letters for tonight's Historic Commission meeting. We will package all of that for the Planning Commission so that they will see that. So you do not have to send it in again unless you have new comments. So if you have new comments or want to add to them, then please do so. But otherwise, everything that you have, we will package and get to the Planning Commission for their public hearing on the 15th. So that will all be taken care of for you. With that, we provided a memo, and I'm gonna walk through some of that stuff, very abbreviated version of this. So the request is, this is the Norton-Grand historic overlay. Several of you had been part of this process that was going through when this was done. There was 2 phases of this. The second phase went down to the south to include the property that we're talking about today. And so what's being proposed to be removed from the historic overlay is this area in red down in this lower corner here. The application that is submitted has 3 components to it. It has a comprehensive plan and zoning map amendment, to multifamily for that same area. And then the zoning code amendment to go to R3 for that area. And then third is Housing Hope has also proposed what we call a development agreement that would address future plan review approval, uses, maximum density, historic design review, and street access. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment here, but there's really three components. The only thing that the Historic Commission at this time, and as the chair laid out, is that this is a meeting. There is expectation that the Historical Commission review and comment to the Planning Commission to modify the historic overlay. And so that is really what's in front of them. And the applicants will kind of state their reasons and go through their drawings a little bit more as to what they found as they're putting the project together as part of that. As the city goes through this request, the criteria for rezones, there's specific criteria that we have to go through consistent with the Everett Comprehensive Plan, public health, safety, welfare, mitigates impacts. And those are things that the Planning Commission is charged to review. And so that's not something that the Historic Commission is charged to review at this time, but the Planning Commission will do that part, make a recommendation. But what's specific to the Historic Commission is really the criteria for the designation of the historic overlay, which are found in chapter 19.33. And they really are actually kind of hard to interpret because they were really kind of written as to how do you establish an overlay, and it's not really clear how you deal with an amendment later. And so we're just kind of assuming, because there's some language down here that talks about that there's a modification process that the Historic Commission can modify the boundary within the area. And so what I've kind of assumed is that's probably applicable, the best thing that's applicable here. And so the criteria here is that the boundaries of the overlay can be modified if the Historical Commission finds that one is that it does not qualify under the provisions of, and have to bounce back up to A1 and A2. And second, the boundaries must be modified in order to protect the historic features identified by the Historic Resource Survey or the Everett Register of Historic Places. So I bounce back up to A1 and A2. One says that the property proposed to be included within the H overlay zone is listed on the Historic Resource Survey. And second is that the proposed is listed on the Everett Register of Historic Places. So as we kind of walk through these criteria, this is some of the facts that I've identified for consideration of the Historic Commission. Is first off, there are no historic structures at all within the area that's proposed to be removed. And so there's nothing in the Historic Resource Survey. So it satisfies that first criteria of A1. Second is the property to be excluded does not include any sites listed on the Everett Register of Historic Places. So again, the property is empty at this time, and so it does not meet either one of those criteria. The third thing is that there are historic structures that are in the vicinity, clearly. I mean, that's why a historic overlay has been developed in this area. But none of those are included to be taken out of the historic overlay. When you go back through the minutes of when the historic overlay was expanded to this property, there's quite a bit of correspondence that you can find in the findings of the Planning Commission and the findings of the City Council with respect to the school district property. And kind of lay that out, the school district had concerns about it being included in the historic overlay, largely because the historic overlay design guidelines did not address what would happen with any buildings there. The design overlay guidelines are really written primarily as single family residential guidelines, and they really don't talk about public properties, things like that. And but the school district properties were exempt from it. They're not part of the trigger, and so that was identified and findings were included in there. But at the same time, the school district did recognize that any change in use or ownership would require compliance with the historic overlay standard. So they really knew that once they sold this property, that compliance with the historic overlay was they understood that at that time. Clearly, the school district has some historic features. The Sequoia High School, that's documented in the meeting notes in the resource inventory for that area. And also for those that were around back in 1955, that the Jackson School was torn down, that was on this vacant property. And so there was historic building on this property at one time, and that became vacant. So one of the things about this is that the proposal keeps the area along Norton Street within the historic overlay. So that helps kind of create that integrity of single family houses, residences along Norton Street as part of that. So the last thing is I just want to kind of cover is about the development agreement. So development agreements are something that the city has used, well, they used to use it quite extensively, and laws had changed back in the 1990s, I think 97, if I'm remembering right. But a development agreement is kind of a contract that happens with a property owner, and sometimes it happens when property is annexed to the city, and sometimes it happens with a rezone proposal. And what a development agreement does, this says that, yeah, this project can move forward, but we're adding additional conditions on this proposal, because just a straight up rezone in this case may not meet some of those conditions in terms of protecting the public health, safety, welfare, or historic resources, things like that. And so Housing Hope has proposed a development agreement that covers several things, but I'm going to talk about the measures that were specific to historic resources. So first off, that portion of the development that fronts on Norton would remain in the historic overlay. So everything is still subject to all the guidelines that are in the historic overlay. And their development plans identify that as single family homes, and they'll walk through their plans for that. The second is that the area that's proposed to be removed from the historic overlay, the draft of conditions of this, it says that even though it's being removed by out of the historic overlay, the plans would still go back through the historic commission for review and approval, and also go through the city council. So the conceptual site plans and the drawings that you see at this point in time is all that would go to back through the historic commission and city council for the entire development. And so one of the things, if you have a motion to support this amendment, it is important to, if this is one of the key things to have as part of that support for that, is to recognize that in your motion that you do want to have the development agreement, that you do want to see the site plan and the building designs, even on the area that's taken out of the historic overlay, to ensure compatibility. So you've been given information, and the applicant's ready to share some of the drawings. Again, we're not asking you to review the site plan exterior elevations at this time. They've given you concepts, but we're not going through the details of those. It gives you an idea of where they're headed with this, but until we get through some of these major policy decisions first, we're not ready for that. So if there's any questions that you have quickly on this part, I'd be glad to try to answer those. Any questions from commission members at all?
No.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, this is Tom.
Okay.
So I'm just curious for the development agreement. So this is between the city and Housing Hope. But during the time the Everett School District still owns the property, they're leasing it to Housing Hope.
Yeah, the school district is leasing it to Housing Hope, and they have I haven't looked at the lease for a year, but I think they have full control and authority to do that. But that's kind of an interesting question, because it's possible that we may need to have the school district sign on to the development agreement as well, if that's a little bit where you're headed with that question.
Yeah, I was. So I was curious, yes, if the the property was leased to someone else in the future, if those same requirements of the development agreement would apply to whoever it was transferred to. So essentially, is it transferable to a new leasee?
Yes, it is transferable, but you raise a good question that I do need to make sure that that authority is in that lease, and that we may need to have the school district sign a development agreement as well for protection.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions, Steve, I think we have someone else from Housing Hope that was going to do the intro, and then Kim Williams. I think we got a different name from Housing Hope than what we gave you earlier, but are you ready to move on to that part?
Yes, let's have you invite the Housing Hope representatives, please.
Okay. So Kim, or who else is the other person?
Yes, we should have Elizabeth online here.
Okay.
I am. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Cole. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Housing Hope, and Kim is going to get us started today.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Williams with Designs Northwest Architects. And before I get going, I'd like to ask either Steve or David, after the public questions or comments after we make our project explanation and description, will we be given a chance to answer further questions after that? Or will it just be a Q&A with the commissioners?
I neglected to say that you'll have some time to answer the public's questions for sure.
Okay, great.
Maybe you should do that before the commissioners have their discussion. So in other words, we'll have the public comments and then you have some time to address those comments.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share here. And I'm going to trust Steve. I only see your screen on my, or your image on my screen. Can everyone see that image? It should be an aerial with a concept site plan superimposed on the neighborhood aerial.
I'm seeing it, yes.
Looks great.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just walk through the project. Again, as a reminder that this is a concept site plan to consider how we could approach this project on behalf of Housing Hope and Everett School District. And then also it's reflective of our outreach with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Housing Hope reached out to the neighbors and offered up an opportunity for whoever was interested to participate in a committee to give us feedback and help us establish project goals so that we could really weave this project into the existing historic neighborhood. We wanted to recognize that. We understand it's a priority. It's essential to this neighborhood. And so, you know, Housing Hope's project vision is to provide housing on the site to serve families experiencing homelessness, which includes students and their families attending nearby Sequoia High School and within the Everett School District. That's the purpose of this project. I thank everyone for being here tonight to consider our application to rezone the eastern portion of the site to an R3, and then also to remove the historic overlay on the eastern portion and the proposed rezone R3 portion of the site, and then to of course, keep the west portion fronting Norton Avenue as a R1 with the historic overlay remaining intact, as David mentioned earlier. So tonight, we're really going to demonstrate that the Norton-Grand historic neighborhood integrity will be maintained throughout the project site, even with the rezone to an R3 with no historic overlay. We will incorporate historic features, and with the aid of the required development agreement, future Historic Commission architectural approval will ensure preservation of the historic character of this neighborhood and this project site. I'm going to go ahead and just walk through a couple statistics for the project. It is 3 acres roughly. Grand Avenue is down below, and as you know, the hill slopes up uphill towards Norton into the historic Grand Norton neighborhood. Single family detached homes, and then there is some single family detached homes along Grand. It's more of a rear facing frontage, and then there's R4 zone 5-story multifamily housing to the south of the project site across Grand Avenue. We're proposing at this time a range of 40 to 50 residential dwelling units. This site reflects 44 units. I'm going to go ahead and work through just another graphic here. Can everyone see the change of sheet? It should be the zoning map. Is that showing up, Steve or David?
Not yet.
Oh,
There.
I'm wondering if is it showing up now?
Yes.
Okay, so you should see a figure 6 zoning map. The red dashed area is the current R1. We're proposing that there's a small dashed line through there, like a light blue. We're proposing that west portion stay R1 historic overlay, and the east portion rezone to R3, which would really better match the zone to the north R3, and then also the zone to the south R4, and proposed the adjustment to the historic overlay boundary to be removed from that eastern portion. I'm changing the screen again here, and you should see a concept site plan, and I'm going to do a zoom in here, see if I can get some better graphic, a little more legibility. And someone let me know that you can see that.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully you can read the number 1 on the page left, the west side of the project. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7. Those are the proposed detached single family dwellings. We are making sure that we follow some project goals. I'm going to walk through a couple of the project goals that were established by Housing Hope and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. We wanted to have integration into the historic neighborhood and incorporate the historic character throughout. We wanted to minimize traffic impact on Norton Avenue. We wanted to include neighborhood access to on-site amenities, limit height for the improvements, achieve low-income family housing with a priority of students experiencing homelessness within the Everett School District. And then I'm going to go ahead and walk through some of those details. And because we're here to talk about historic concepts and character, I'm going to toggle through here, and you should see an image change to a perspective rendering showing the proposed streetscape from Norton Avenue at the north west corner of the site looking south. Let me know when you see that image.
Yes.
Okay, great. We wanted to do this computer modeling to really demonstrate that with the proposed single family frontage and spacing and vehicle access coming up off of Grand Avenue, not off of Norton, and keeping the parking behind this row of single family residences on Norton, that we were really trying to preserve the character of the neighborhood. We include architectural components, and we'll get into this later after, with the development agreement and the later approvals of the design, but we're showing historic characteristics like front porches, pitched roofs, decorative eaves, cottage or story-and-a-half massing. We have porches, dormers, roof massing designs. The facades are not repetitive, so it's reflective of the built over time nature of a historic neighborhood. We have the next, I'm going to click through the next image here. I appreciate someone telling me when you do see the image change.
Yes. Right
here is another view moving further south, looking from across the street at the existing residences along Norton. Our intention was to maintain the single-family detached historic residences, keep them level, their entrances level with the sidewalk, even though there's an existing grade that slopes down, keep them level, and then have fencing and landscaping in between the houses, include architectural finishes and treatment on all four sides of all structures on the site, so that it's truly reflective of historic projects and not just a facade, street frontage facade only with the great details, and then cheaper materials on the remaining three sides. We're including treatment on all four sides of structures. And then also that behind the solid fencing and landscaping of the front yards of these single family detached houses, we would be hiding the parking for the whole development behind them to the interior of the site. I'm going to go ahead, and then from here too, I want to point out that we are showing the actual height and grades that we would be proposing these 3-story multifamily structures that are to the interior of the site. And due to the nature of how we experience perspective with our human eye, we always have a horizon vanishing point. And so taller objects that are further away appear just as tall or smaller than objects that are nearer and shorter. So you can see that effect here with this computer aided program that is reflective of the actual size of the structures, that it's in the distance, it's beyond the parking, that the 3 multifamily buildings that are 3 in a row of the interior of the site are really aligned together to minimize staggering. They're lined up one behind the other with intention, so that we minimize kind of the footprint to the site and minimize the visual impact to the adjacent properties. I'm going to go ahead and switch another image here. You should see it change in a moment.
Yes.
Here is a peekaboo view that you would see from between the single family houses along Norton. This is an actual proposed pedestrian avenue that would offer access for pedestrians into the site for residents. And then they'd be able to cross into the middle of the site where the other multifamily houses are. This is the first glimpse you would get of the 3-story structure in the middle of the site that is the multifamily flats. I do want to go over those very quickly. They are proposed to be buildings A and B and C in the middle of the site. You're seeing building A right here. The ground floor would be administrative and community gathering space for the residents, as well as office spaces and support services. The second and third floor would be 4 units each, so a total of 8 units in that building A. Building B and C would each have 12 units, 4 units per floor. And I'll show you in a moment, they're accessed by exterior stairs that face to the interior of the site. And then in a moment, you'll get, I'm going to change the image here. You're going to get a glimpse of the southernmost multifamily building. It's 5 townhomes that are 2-story units, more of a row housing concept. And they're 2-story from this pedestrian avenue level, but as the driveway comes up from Grand Avenue and curves around to the parking area, we're hoping to take advantage of the grade and put some daylight parking underneath the building. So that would be a 3rd floor, really daylight basement style for open parking. And then I'm going to go ahead and this might be a little hard to read, but oops. This should be some images that you'll see of the single family detached residences and the different elevations. This is showing the story 1.5 story single family, which would be along Norton. I'm going to go ahead and skip through these. Commissioners, you should have these in your packet already. I would like to show you what building A would be. You started to see glimpses of that. The west, let me know someone if you see building A elevations.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, the west elevation on the top right of your page would be what would be facing the Norton Avenue to the west, and that would be behind all of those single family historic homes. As you can see, we are utilizing similar architectural components, pitch roofs, different roof massings, hip roofs, gable roofs, broken hip roofs, and shed roofing for more of a porch entrance feature. We are utilizing lower eaves so that it really reads more like a dormer. So it reads similar to a 2.5 story massing rather than a full 3 story. And then the exterior stair structure that you see in this bottom right page, that would be to the interior of the site. So it would be facing building B that would be next to it. I'm going to go ahead and skip through building B here and jump to building C. Let me know when you can see it. I just got a message that I have a bad connection. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you okay.
Okay. Is building C showing up for the elevation yet?
I believe that's, yes.
Okay. Again, the lower right image of the east elevation would be facing this building C would be the furthest east at the top of the hill there. We're going to do what we can to try to preserve those existing trees with still gaining vehicle access down from Grand Avenue below and sloping that driveway up the site and around to the south. But this east elevation at the lower right of this sheet would be what would be facing Grand Avenue to the east. And then for neighbors interested in what you would see from the north, here's an example. The top left image of this sheet would be an example of the 3 multifamily units you would see aligned facing to the so it would be 3 of those similar but different roof massings. They're all a little bit different. Again, trying to use covered porches or covered entrances to indicate entrances. Really trying to use a appearance of a dormer with a main eave line that is lower. And then I'm going to go ahead and show building D here. Should change in a moment. This is the townhomes that are proposed.
Yes.
Again, this is showing an example of how we can take advantage of the hillside and the driveway access coming up the hill and be able to achieve 8 parking spaces below the building. And then you really wouldn't see that from the Norton side of the project along Norton Avenue. You would really just see front porches and that west elevation at the bottom left of your sheet here. And I'm going to go ahead and change this image. I just want to recap a little bit on the project goals again that we established with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Really trying to minimize the impact of the traffic on Norton Avenue. We did that by pulling the vehicle access from Grand Avenue and not allowing any driveway entrances along Norton. Historic neighborhoods do have driveways that tend to go behind the houses or in a little like a side yard, rear carport or garage behind the house. But we wanted to heed to the concerns about the dangerous Norton Hill and the speeding that happens in the neighborhood, and wanted to really not pull any more vehicles unnecessarily down Norton Avenue and maintain that quieter neighborhood. So we are aiming to have all vehicle access coming up from Grand up the hill. The other thing we wanted to do is make sure there was plenty of parking on the site. Housing Hope tenants historically have less than 1 car per dwelling unit, which is hard to imagine in our culture, but we've provided more than that. We've provided 53 on-site parking spaces, which would be for the 44 units each, 1 for each unit, and then also for some visitors and staff parking. We also, I'm going to go back to bear with me here. I'm going to go back to the site plan to talk about some, and you should see it in a minute. We are trying to encourage some neighborhood access, convey access through the site. We understand there's the existing trail that comes up from Grand Avenue up to the existing field. We wanted to achieve pedestrian connection through the site for the public. We wanted to achieve a public outdoor recreation space. So we've created on the north property line a public pocket park and a public pedestrian path. And then as it encounters, as you come from Norton, it follows the property line. There's a little pocket park tucked into the north corner of the site, a little more in the middle. And then as you go to the east and encounter the slope, we have a stair system and ramp system that would be fully accessible to convey neighborhood and tenants down the hill to existing commercial and transit and schools bus stops. We really wanted to place it there. We did not want to have pedestrians right as vehicles are coming up the Norton Hill because of safety concerns. We also, as another traffic calming approach, we're proposing some on-street parking that would be available to the public, avoiding the existing mature and still when you have parking, parallel parking flanking a street, it tends to be a natural traffic calming mechanism. So we're providing neighborhood access to on-site amenities. Some other recreational amenities that we've included for the residents is a sport court and fire access turnaround. So you see that in the middle northern part of the site, a gridded circle, that is the proposed sports court and outdoor recreation area for the residents. And then as you go south from there, there's between building B and C, we have a youth play area. And then further south along the pedestrian avenue that aligns a little bit with Clinton Place and through the site, we have a toddler play area, a picnic plaza, and also raised garden bed gardening area. And then a little bit of kind of a resting place would be the pedestrian entrance along Norton Avenue at the start of that pedestrian avenue that really allows walking access for the residents into the site. We also have a pedestrian connection following the proposed driveway up from Grand Avenue, and so it would flank the outside there and get pedestrians safely up into the project site without being in the way of cars backing up and so. One of the other goals would be to retain and supplement existing landscaping. So we really, as I mentioned a moment ago, we're intending to preserve the existing street trees along Norton and Grand wherever we possibly can, including with the pedestrian path and ramp system down the hill. We'll try to avoid trees there. We will have to do some retaining coming up to cut the grades and retain for the driveway accessing the site up the hill. But again, we will mitigate wherever we have to remove trees. We'll be mitigating for that, and then supplementing the site throughout with landscaping to act as screening specifically along the north and south property lines. It'll be really important that we achieve landscape buffer screening with fencing and dense landscaping. One of the main reasons why we're looking at the removal of the historic overlay for the eastern portion of the site is due to height limitations of the historic overlay. Typically it's 28 feet with for R1 zone, 28 feet with a 24-foot eve height. And then I believe if it's a R3 rezone with a historic overlay, I believe it was 35 feet. So yes, 35 feet. And so we are close, but not quite. the proposed finished floor from the proposed ground finished floor of buildings A, B, and C, we're looking at roughly 38 feet to accomplish the 3 full stories and the top of ridge of the massing that we're showing in our concept elevations right now. So we're close, but not quite. And that's why we're asking for, it's a balance of asking for this historic overlay removal so that we can push that height limit a little bit to achieve the 3 stories. And also so that we can really have a viable project for Housing Hope to be able to offer this service of serving homeless families for students in the Everett School District.
Thanks, Kim. And as Kim said, it's important to us to put those multifamily units in there so that we can have ample green space and parking spaces for families, so we're not impacting Norton. And we still want to keep with the historic look of those buildings when we put them in. So we would like to just thank the neighborhood and everybody that's been involved in that committee and helping us put together. They've put in a lot of work to make sure that we have a project that's going to honor the intent of the neighborhood to stay historic. And it's been really exciting to be a part of a project like this. So thank you for letting us come here today and propose this project.
Kim and Elizabeth, are you through with your presentation?
Just a moment, I just want to skim my notes here, make sure I covered everything.
While she's skimming her notes, I would say that, we have had the opportunity once before to work with a historic building at our Commerce building down at Hewitt. And it has been an honor to work with that before and hope that we can continue that good work. Kim, are you good?
Yeah, I think really Housing Hope's goal is to maintain the historic integrity of the neighborhood. We don't want to come in and develop and destroy. Housing Hope works well because they really are serving the community and the neighborhood, and it's very important for Housing Hope as an organization that they have support of the neighborhood, that they honor the existing character and charm of the historic neighborhood. And we really worked with Housing Hope and the Neighborhood Advisory Committee to really refine and limit the massing on the site. If I'm going to scroll back to my opening image here, if you look at the aerial site plan with the site superimposed, you start to see that the building footprints in the existing historic neighborhood, it's very similar. It's not gargantuan like the R4 Grand condominiums to the south. We really have really wanted to honor the integrity and really just match and be integrated into the neighborhood. So we appreciate everyone's time tonight, and we appreciate the Commission's consideration of this rezone and adjustment to the historic overlay boundary. I think that's it for now.
We're good.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Okay, Kim, you need to stop sharing the screen then.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think we'll have David, you've got more control over Microsoft Teams. So I think we'll have you go through the public comments, have you read off names, etc. Thank you, David.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go from the top, and for those of you that may have your either your computer or your phone muted, when if I call out, just unmute yourself. So I have it says it's 3525 Norton Avenue, Hubbard. If you are talking, I cannot hear you. Unmute your *6 on your phone. $35.25 Norton. Okay, we'll come back. Oh, you there?
Yes. I
Did you?
don't.
Well, the question that I had in the overlay that I saw on the proposed plan that you put in there, I noticed that you had the pedestrian entrance onto Norton Avenue there, as well as 4 parking spaces right along Norton there that are gonna be right at the top of that dangerous hill. With 96 people coming into that area, I'm not sure that you've actually looked into the fact that that would be a very dangerous location to have both parking on the street that there traditionally hasn't been parking on that side, as well as a stream of pedestrians coming out into what's traditionally been the most dangerous part of our street.
So could you, I'm sorry, I should have told everyone, I think I recognize the voice, but could you identify yourself for the record?
My name is Matthew Hubbard.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick response in that we are not going through the details. We have not even circulated any of this stuff to Public Works for the details of where things are going to be laid out. Right now, this is just a concept plan, but those types of things will be reviewed by our city engineers and safety folks if this project moves forward. So next on the list, I have Carol Duvall.
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
I just want to express my disgust at this proposal. I believe that once again, Housing Hope is trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes to get what they want. And this concept is, it's not acceptable at all in my mind. And I vote no. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carol. Next going down the list, but I think he's working for the applicant, I got Dan Nelson. So Dan, I presume you're a pass. You can give me a thumbs up.
I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Dave Koenig, you're still on the list. I see you. Do you want to comment? Dave, you're muted. If you want to talk.
I do not wish to comment.
All right, thanks, Dave. I have EK. Initials EK.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Elizabeth Koenig, 3516 Norton. I sent in a letter that detailed a lot of my concerns about this. But before I mention those, I guess I just don't understand how the committee is expected to vote without reviewing the plan. It seemed like they were told that they didn't need to look at it. And it would seem that since they are a historic commission, that they would want to look at the plan. So that was kind of confusing to me. But very briefly, my concerns are that public input and involvement have been important to the city, and honoring the work that was put into creating the historic overlay back, I guess it was 10 years ago. It just seems like there needs to be some consideration about that. I'm also really concerned about the people who can't participate in this, and to say that everyone can participate without any problems right now in these online meetings is just not correct. Also, I'm concerned about changing one of the historic overlay areas is going to set a precedent which will allow developers to erode the other parts of this overlay and other historic overlays. Sorry, I'm really nervous. And I just want to say that everyone who lives in a historic overlay should be concerned about this, whether they live on Norton or on Grand. And the building heights, we thought they were going to be 35 feet, but now I hear they're 38 feet. They will be much higher than anything else on the block. And keeping the overlay in place is what I hope you vote for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Hearing some background noise at times, so just for those of you that aren't speaking, please make sure you mute your mic at the time. So I had someone raise their hands. It looks like they put it down, or maybe not. Greg and who did I see? Greg and Andrea. Did you wish to speak? Okay.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So Greg and Andrea Moret, we're at 3604 Norton Avenue. We're directly across from the proposed house number 3 on the Norton Avenue side of the proposed project. I'm highly concerned about the possible removal of the historical overlay. This is a working class neighborhood. We have put everything we have into our homes. This is where we want to live. We want to live in a neighborhood. We fought for the historic overlay to begin with. None of us can afford to relocate. And that's what that will largely change our quality of life in our homes that we've worked really hard to not just purchase, but also maintain. My husband and I recently have refurbished our entire exterior, including new fencing and landscaping on our property. And it's our pride and joy. And we're highly concerned about the possibility of the density coming across the street from us. It's not a matter of whether or not there be housing for the homeless, which is what this seems to have turned into, more of like a play on our emotions, but also the density and the quality of life for the people that have put their entire livelihoods into this area. It sets a terrible precedence for the rest of the city. However, other areas might not be as impacted as other historical overlays in the city of Everett are a more affluent society, and so possibly won't have this kind of issue come up for them. We've lived in this home for 20 years, and I will tell you that we chose not to be on the Neighborhood Advisory Commission because Housing Hope is not a good neighbor. There's 2 homes on the end of our block. One is a large shelter. The other one is a Housing Hope rental property. That property itself, it's a single family home. There's 5 to 8 cars parked there every night. There's loud music, there's swearing, there's yelling at their children. Housing Hope is aware of this problem and has done nothing at all to mediate the problem. So I highly encourage you to not allow for the removal or change or modification of the historical overlay. That's all.
All right, thank you, Andrea. I have skipped over, I guess, Elizabeth Cole.
I'm with Housing Hope.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Jim Dean is next on the list.
Hi, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. I've been living in this neighborhood for 22 years, and 21 years ago, there was a project designed to be placed in our historic neighborhood that was to be rezoned from R3, which almost all of this historic overlay is currently, into a commercial zoning and allowing them to go from what was allowed 12 units to a 60 or 70 unit. And so that's the reason why we started this process. This same piece of property went through a rezoning process 4 years later, And right after that, we asked the city council members and the planning commission, what can we do to stop this particular activity? In this particular case, it was trying to put in maximum density. And in this particular case, we're talking about 80 units in a space that right now can, by zoning, can only have 12 units in it. So that's the key that you need to think about here is the R3 zoning would allow 12 units. The commercial zoning would have allowed at that point in time up to 80 units, according to what they believed in their plan. The reason why we asked for this overlay was to protect the homes that were on Norton and Grand between 35th and Pacific, in order to get an opportunity to protect them from a couple of things. The big reason that we were worried about was both expansion of something big like this, but it was more in terms of keeping the historic homes from being demolished without some kind of a process that people went through, because the plan at that point in time in many cases would be to take down a dilapidated home and put in its place a mega house that would go from as far as it can go from one end to the other and not meet the neighborhood's design standards at all. The second thing that we were looking at here was looking at having a similar setback so that the streetscape remains looking the same as what it does now in this particular time. And then we also want to have similar design elements so that if you think about some places that we run into Seattle, particularly I think of the south side of Queen Anne Hill, where people have put up these monster boxes that go to the highest, from as far out as they can go in any direction and as high as they can go in a box, next to these very nice, quaint, and desirable homes. That's the thing we wanted to avoid having in our home, in our particular neighborhood. We went through a process and made this happen, and then a few years later, the folks who lived south of 35th decided they wanted to have theirs part of that same thing. That's when we added single-family zoning parts to this, because everything else before this was R3. If you look at the request that's being made by Housing Hope in this particular case, is they are protecting the R1 character along Norton. And I think that's one that I applaud them for the effort they have made to make it so that they've got housing across from your house that looks like your house and will have people living in it like your house, but also mitigated for traffic. But then the other thing that I really want to thank them for is not overreaching in the other part. If you think about R5 to the south of you down there, you think of R4 across the street, across Grand, that's now the new design building, it's the 47 unit apartment building that's there. They're nothing like that in terms of the design that they're asking for. And finally, I was part of the process and was part of the neighborhood committee that was looking at the design stuff here. And I really applaud them for the amount of time they spent with us to make this happen. So I want to thank them for it, and really thank the Historic Commission for looking at kind of this history of what we did here, but realizing that this is very much staying and trying as much as possible to keep all the elements of the historic overlay in place, even though we're talking an R3 zoning change here. So I want to thank you all for that. And did I lose everybody?
All right, thank you, Jim. I have a K. Williams Norton Avenue, so I don't know if that's, we have a K. Williams on Norton Avenue, or is it?
There is a different K. Williams. Carrie Williams, I think, had a public comment letter.
So go ahead, Carrie, unmute yourself, *6 on your phone. Okay, well, did I hear someone? No. Okay, I'm gonna go down the list. I got Kat, I don't know how to say your last name, Bartonen, I think. Kat, your phone is muted. See,
Hi,
you're
yes.
putting, you got it? Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
I typed something, but I may as well just say it. I don't know. I'm sure you've all seen the field. The fact that these apartment buildings will be 3 stories, they will still be completely visible from Norton Avenue. The line showing R1, the current pocket of R1 that extends into the R3, looks different in a graph than it does in reality. all of those buildings will be clearly visible from Norton. And the fact that Housing Hope keeps focusing on the design elements doesn't change really the impact to the neighborhood. There are a proposed density of 97 bedrooms and a proposed density of 97 residents. That's one resident per bedroom, and that is per Fred Sastrom's presentation. And that's pretty unrealistic that only 97 people will occupy 97 bedrooms. One would hope that there would be a mommy and a daddy in most of those homes, and that would be an additional person easily per unit. So I would really like you to think about, as you're making your decision, what the true impact visually and population-wise will be to the historic nature of the neighborhood. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kat. So there's a question. So some people are putting things in the chat, and they really are not recorded as part of the public record. I don't know that there's a way to do that. So if you have comments, please send them in by email and not in the chat, or put that orally in comments. So we'll see if we can try to capture that. But right now, I have not had to do that. So with that, I have next I have, and these folks are part of the consultants, but just want to check in. Laura Brent. Laura, do you have anything to add? Okay, Laura. Don't hear anything. Paula Townsell. Okay, so Paula, I see you're shaking your head no. I think Rachel Downs. Rachel, we've already gone through, right?
Yeah, I'm also with Housing Hope.
Okay, very good. Ken Rees.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay, great. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Appreciate it. I just wanted to say a couple of things right off the bat. And for Kim, I appreciate your giving us this presentation, but I would like to point out that this project really doesn't have the neighborhood support if we're talking about the people who live closest to this and being most impacted by it. There was a neighborhood advisory group set up, you're correct, and we were all invited to go to that, or to be a part of that. But all but 2 households on Norton chose not to, because we just simply oppose this for a variety of reasons, some of which you've already heard tonight. So some of the things I would like to say in asking the Historical Commission to not grant this exemption is, personally, I've lived here 5 years at 3427 Norton. I spent the first 3.5 years of that putting my heart and soul into rebuilding our house here. It's 116 years old now. Hopefully it'll last another 116 years with all the work we put into it. That was the goal, and we plan to stay here. So anyhow, that's kind of our story so far in Everett. We did do our research, and we looked in several neighborhoods in North Everett. We looked in the Northwest area. We looked in Riverside. We looked at the historical overlays, and we had our eye on Rucker Hill for quite a long time. So we kind of fell in love with this. With great neighbors. Everybody takes an immense amount of pride in their homes here, and people have worked very hard to restore homes, kick out drug homes that used to exist along the 3500 block of Norton. So people have, we've all put in a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and money into our homes here. So we're very protective. And I think that's a good thing. I think every neighborhood should have a say in how it's governed, what happens to it. And it's a great thing when you have people that take an immense amount of pride in the place they live. I appreciate Jim's efforts in building or in helping to create the historic overlay. It's not exactly as I had understood it to be. I understand it's, basically helps to avoid having those boxy style homes built, and I'd hate to see those too. but it seems like it should give us a little more protection from something this large. We've done our level best using a variety of measuring tools to try to figure out what the visual impact will be. There are historic homes on the north side, the south side, and all along the west side of this property, as well as on the east side, the homes that back up to Grand. So it's pretty well encircled by historic homes. So that the impact that they'll have is, I won't have to look at it, but a lot of folks will. I take a little bit of, or I guess I would challenge you on the homes along Norton. The grade there drops from anywhere between 1 foot below street level to 5 to 6 feet below, going from the north to the south edge. I've been involved in several construction projects, and I know that kind of fill would not be inexpensive. So I fully expect that you guys will file a plan amendment at some point and drop those street frontage homes down to the existing grade, which would make the home or the building A, B, and C loom even larger over the homes across the street, which are on a little bit of an uphill grade themselves. So they will be looking down at this. So I think the precedents that get set by chipping away at these historical overlays is just something that the Historical Commission should not do. Once you do that and you set that precedence, really Housing Hope is a developer, at least in this capacity. Any developer could come along and attempt to do the same thing. Whether or not they'd be allowed to is another thing, but they could pursue it. I would also just to the trees along the back. I'm a person who values trees. I do not see, having walked back there multiple times, how you would preserve, except for maybe just a couple of those trees. The root systems are complex. Your road's going to run right through most of them. I know it's easier to ask forgiveness and permission, and I'm fully expecting that that's what you'll be doing. So I don't see those trees surviving. And I would also say the pocket park is, well, it's small. It's I looked at your measuring tool on your site plan, and it's about 30 by 32. So it's probably a nice little place to stop and rest when you're walking along that sequestered northern corridor, which will have a wood fence on one side and chain link with slats on the other side. Not exactly a desirable walking space, more like kind of a tunnel through the north side of the property. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure some people will enjoy it. So I also agree with Andrea and Greg and some of the other folks that have talked about our current supportive housing. As a lot of folks know, we have Kennedy Court and we have Windermere Crossing. I live right across from Windermere Crossing, and at times it's a real challenge. The police are there often. And I looked at their police reports themselves, and I think there were 42 call-outs that actually generated reports in the last 2-year period. There are a lot more call-outs that don't generate reports, but I would say that you guys don't have a great track record as far as institutional control. And I myself have talked to Fred Safstrom on 2 occasions in the last 6 weeks about the rental house that somebody had brought up earlier. That's the smaller house to the south of Windermere Crossing, but part of that complex. And have gotten absolutely zero assistance. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I know you only can consider whether to exempt this from the historical overlay. So I'm hoping that you don't. And I thank everybody for their time tonight.
All right, thank you, Ken. I have Susan Mousehart.
That's Susan Mosshart, and Ted Mosshart, my husband, is going to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. We live on 1112 Clinton Place, half a block from Norton Playfield. We've lived in this house it's a 111-year-old house. We're one of 5 owners, and that's in large part due to the amazing house we live in, but also the neighborhood. It's quiet, quaint, and neighborly. And I feel like when you talk about the character of the historic overlay, there's nothing more historic, I think, than having a land to look at. It's a park, it's used, and it fits into the landscape of our neighborhood. You know, when I think about there being a project and as something being built, I harken back to what the city council and the planning commission both came to last year, where they were not supportive of building high density buildings in a single family neighborhood. Historic, yeah. So we're at this position because Housing Hope basically got denied by the city council and the planning commission to build a project that's, you know, that might involve 150 people. And so going back to what Ken was saying, if there's that much police activity for a project of, let's say there's 30 people at Windermere Crossing, this would have 5 times the amount of people. So I'm just, when I first saw the building, the visual, it's offensive. It's just, there's no space. The building is right up against the Norton Avenue. It's it just makes my heart race to think that there would be a small village living a half a block from where we live. So I am in support of keeping the historic overlay, and thank you for our time.
All right, thank you, Ted. Todd Bullock, I presume you're with Housing Hope, I think, so pass on
Correct,
you.
I'm with Housing Hope.
Thanks, Todd. So I have some phone numbers. I'm getting down to the end of the identified name list, so I'm going to call out some numbers I got. Make sure I'm not calling a historic commission member. So I got 293-1933 phone number. I don't think that's a historic commission member. So if you're on the line, you're muted right now. You need to *6. Last 4 digits, 1933. Okay. And I think with that, I think I've gone through all the names. So I guess just open it up to see if there's anybody else that I didn't call on that needs to speak before turning this back to Housing Hope to provide some final comments.
Hello?
Hello?
This is 1933. I didn't know that I was in line to speak, but I would like to speak.
Yes, please. Just state your name,
I have
please.
lived in this neighborhood. I have lived in this neighborhood, Greg Williams. Lived in this neighborhood for 15 years now, and one of the biggest reasons we moved here was to raise our family in a nice, peaceful community. And a big interest in that was the field next to our house. I've watched my kids grow up in that field, learn to play soccer, used to wake up every Sunday morning to kids playing soccer in that field. I've watched my kids crawl, learn to throw their balls, play. I've met most of my neighbors in that field. We've done birthday parties. The idea that someone like Housing Hope and Ed, who is so connected with the school board, can get land for $1 a year and build whatever they want on it is absolutely disgusting to me, because that field has been there for use of these neighbors for over 80 years. And it's a place for people to feel at home and to build relationships. It's not a place to destroy a historic overlay, which is very difficult to get in this area, and is one of the biggest reasons that we were ambitious to move here, was the historic area, the beautiful little homes. I understand that Everett needs to grow, and I understand there is a demand for homeless housing, but there's already over 400 units that Housing Hope owns, and so much more already being built. The saturation in our one little neighborhood would just be way too much, and I really feel that open space is more necessary than more housing for homeless. As our area is growing by the demand that you've already set up and the locations you've already changed the zoning to build, aren't these areas going to need places for people to be able to meet and play and run and be children and laugh and giggle and get exercise? That seems to be completely forgotten with your growth ideas of Everett. I mean, we are R1 historic overlay, and it should stay that way. That's what I feel. Thank you for letting me speak.
All right, thank you. Just to confirm, I heard your name, Ted Williams. Is that right? You went back.
It's Greg Williams. Greg.
Greg Williams?
That was him.
All right, thank you, Raj. Okay, so I think I've gone down through the list of everybody. Is there anyone that I did miss? Okay, going once, going twice. I don't hear anything. I'm gonna, Kim, are you gonna, for Housing Hope, Kim Williams?
I'll go.
Hi there. Can
Hey,
everyone
Kim.
hear me? I can go ahead and offer a couple clarifications. I was just jotting down some quick notes here. I do want to, can everyone hear me? Yes. I wanted to clarify the historic character. First of all, thank you everyone for sharing. We hear your concerns and we hear your pride in your neighborhood and the work that you've done on your own homes to renovate and the effort that you went through to seek out this neighborhood and choose it for its character and charm. Again, Housing Hope really, the goal here for the project is to, through the function and mechanism of the development agreement with the city of Everett, to still go through historic commission review of the entire project site. It wouldn't just be for the R1 zone with the historic overlay along Norton. It would be historic commission review and planning commission approval would be required of the specific project design for the entire site. And that would ensure quality of construction and that historic features are implemented to the project. Regarding very much a reoccurring theme of the loss of the park space, we acknowledge that it's a difficult transition to go from open field that's available for open recreation by all neighbors and visitors to a developed site. That is a very difficult pill to swallow. We understand that. I wanted to emphasize that it's currently used by children and families, and it will continue to be used by children and families because the residents of Housing Hope properties are families. They're not individual adults without children. There will be minor children as part of the family unit. Each of the units are 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. It won't be studios. It won't be 1-bedroom apartments. The playground, sports court, garden, and picnic plaza for the residents will continue the tradition of families recreating on the site in outdoor spaces. Regarding I think another reoccurring theme was the height concern and the size of structures. I kept hearing the height concern, and also concern about holding, maintaining a level grade with the sidewalk along Norton for the row of single family structures. The overall site, regarding the concerns about maybe a developer skimping on the grading effort there and wanting to sink those single family detached houses. That would be a minor aspect in the overall cost or scheme of the project. The grades have to be, the goal, generally speaking, I'm going to gesture with my hands. I apologize for whoever can't see, but there is an immediate step slope down right now in the existing field from the existing sidewalk at Norton. It's about 4 to 6 feet over the width of the project north to south, and also from the west it's high and then goes down to the east to the really top of the hillside there by the existing tree line. And the goal there is to maintain the historically designed detached single-family houses level with the sidewalk in front of them. So they won't be all level flat as you go north to south. They'll jog, step up and down and really mimic development over time, matching existing sidewalk grade. And then our goal is to gradually slope the entire site down towards from west to east in a gradual fashion to make up that existing grade difference of roughly 4 to 6 feet. So as you get to building A, it'll be a foot or so below the single, or maybe a couple feet below the single family residences at Norton. And then by the time you get all the way to the east to building C, the far east, it would be a little bit further lower. So the whole field area to accommodate this development would have some regrading anyway. And so it wouldn't be a hindrance. It wouldn't be a hindrance to the project to maintain sidewalk level for the single family entrances. And again, the height concerns, a looming height is, I think, a concern for all of those multifamily buildings. And I just want to point out that to the north, the next to the north property line, the buildings A, B, and C would be roughly 80 feet from the north property line, set back lower into the middle of the site. From Norton, from the west property line along Norton, that building A frontage, the building A elevation behind the houses, past the parking, would be about over 160 feet away. We really try, and then the other thing about those 3 buildings in the middle of the site, again, I mentioned this a moment ago, we really would be gradually sinking those and lowering them as the site gradually slopes to downhill towards the east a little bit. So again, trying to hold up the single family detached housing and then sloping down a little bit.
So Kim, if I could interrupt, we're starting to run a little bit long on presentation here. So you're getting into a lot of details that are really not in front of the Historical Commission right now at this time. So they have a kind of a basic question about things, but they if this goes forward, they'll have another shot at all those details.
Right,
So
right.
if you have any wrap up stuff on historic overlay stuff, that would probably be best right now.
Kim, why don't I wrap it up really quick? I just want to thank everybody. I am so excited about everybody's passion. I myself live in a 1933 arts and crafts house and live down the street from 2 of Housing Hope sites. And I would like to point out that we do have the Commerce Building on Hewitt, and we have done historic preservation work before. And we have put the time, money into it to maintain that. And the agreement is in place so that the oversight, so that we are still coming in front of this committee to make sure that we're staying in line with what the intent of that overlay is, to honor what the community is asking for, with having a look and feel of a community that has been built up over time in downtown Everett.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. So Steve, back to you in commission time.
All right, thank you, David, and thank you to all the citizens who commented and the applicants for their comments too. So now we're going to have the commissioners ask questions and make their own comments. Probably the best way to do this is to go through them one by one, like we did with the public comments. But we may need to go through it a couple times in case new questions come up. So David, it's probably best for you to cycle through our commissioners. Please.
Okay. Well, I'll go alphabetically by first name. So I got Amy first.
Sure. So I just want to clarify that we can have a rezone to R3 that's within a historical overlay. That's point one. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The limiting factor there is height, that the height limit is 35 feet for an R3 in a historic overlay.
The limiting factor, so this is one of the things that's so great about our zoning code is actually it's 35 feet, but there is a allowance for a 10% bonus for certain pitched roofs, so you can get almost to 38 feet. But the other limit is that it's only 24 feet to eaves, and I think there's a combination of those different heights that's a challenge for what they have right now.
Okay, so I mean, that's exactly where I was going with this, is that with that variance potential, is there not a way for Housing Hope to pursue their project as an R3 still in the historic overlay?
Well, they could, but they would have to meet both the height requirements and the design requirements of the overlay. Yes. So they might have to make some modifications from their design as they have it right now.
All right, and then just one more question. This was from your overview at the beginning, David. You said the school district properties are exempted from the overlay expansion, but they agreed that any change in use or ownership triggers overlay compliance. Correct? How does that like tie this up in a tidy bow?
So it's not actually the school district properties, it's the development of school facilities is not require compliance with the historic overlay. So the ownership itself is not the issue. It's the type of development that does not trigger any review by historic overlay.
I'm wanting to make sure I understand that correctly. You said at the beginning that a change in use would trigger overlay compliance.
Well, a change in ownership or use. Yeah. So doing something other than school facilities. So if the school district this has been part of their surplus plans for a long time. And so they recognize if they sold it to someone to develop for housing that it would be subject to the historic overlay. Yes, they recognize that.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I got Andrea next.
So, hi there. Is this Housing Hope's tallest building that they're building outside of the Broadway building? And that's for Kim.
Do you mean building in general, like all the buildings we have?
What was that?
That was
Andrea,
Elizabeth.
I'm sorry. This is Elizabeth from Housing Hope, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer. So if you're asking about other buildings that we have, I'd be the person to answer that question. And no, we do actually have one taller building, and that would be the Commerce Building on Hewitt in downtown Everett.
Right. So that's in a commercial. That's our historic district in a commercial. And I've been involved. I was there for the window ceremony, so I've been involved in it for a long time. And I know that it was.
We do have. I'm sorry. Yes, we do have other buildings that are similar in heights or a little bit taller in other communities, but not more than 3 stories.
In neighborhoods.
We specialize in small.
In a neighborhood then. Okay. And then
almost all of our housing is in neighborhoods, yes.
Okay, I just haven't seen any that are quite 38 feet tall, so I was just wondering. And then as far as going back to the trees, I know a lot of us are concerned about the trees and the maple tree. And David, I don't mean to go into the details, but I think they gave us a lot of details. So I just wanted to see how on earth they're going to preserve the trees that they mentioned. Is there any like plan for, I know the maple tree you talked about, and then Kim earlier said we're going to try to preserve the trees, but is that realistic or is that fantasy?
Oh, for Christ's sake.
May I
Yeah,
clarify?
I said for Christ's sake.
I'm not sure who said that, but again, we're kind of getting into details of future site planning. I think those are good observations. I took those notes as well, Andrea, that those are potential additions to a development agreement, including trees and grades and elevations, things like that. So, but those are details really that are down the road.
Okay. And then, so Amy asked about the development agreement. And so that it feels contradictory that it's a school district, but then you said that they might have to sign the development agreement with when Tom asked that. So.
Yeah, my only worry, and the reason that it raises an interesting question, I'd have to talk with our legal staff, is that a development agreement is basically something with the property owner, and I'd want to make sure that if it was just between the city and Housing Hope, that that is strong enough and binding to the underlying owner of the school district. So I really don't know the answer to that, but I would imagine that that the school district would be, since they already entered into a lease agreement, that they would sign an agreement like that.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
It's just a worry about loopholes, and we just don't, want to find that there's a loophole. It got rezoned, and we signed an agreement with Housing Hope, but then that didn't turn out, and some other developer picked up the property. So.
So,
All right,
someone who said, for Christ's sake, if they have a comment, I think they should say that, identify themselves.
Yeah, I have no idea who did that. So I have next Arnold.
All right, let's see if I get off mute here. So during your site feasibility, how did you guys come up with the extra density to make it profitable? I mean, what is the where's the trade-off for keeping it what it is and trying to develop the site and going for the extra height bonus, which is dollars. I get that.
Yeah. We'll take this one. Maybe we'll tag team on this one a little bit. It really is because we don't have to purchase the land, and we are building this project for the Everett Public Schools. Only their students are eligible for this housing. And as such, since we don't have to pay for the land, we're able to put more money into things like making sure it's in compliance with the historic overlay.
Okay.
And in lowering the density as well, because you're right, in another scenario, we might have to have a higher density. In this case, we don't. Kim, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to, this is Kim Williams with Designs Northwest Architects. I just want to respond that it's not a measure of profitability. It's a measure of viability for the project. Housing Hope fundraises their funds and applies for grant programs through various funding mechanisms. It's not looking, this wouldn't be sold in a market context, so it's not a measure of profit. It's a measure of, as Elizabeth mentioned, the density that can be achieved and the project cost, and whether or not it's a worthwhile project for Housing Hope to pursue and manage and provide.
All right. What social services are in that area to support the future tenants? Because there is a concern that I've heard of, you have other homes in that area that sounds like the people in that area are not happy with what is going on. So, I mean, if there's social services, is this the best site? to help out that future clientele. Because if it doesn't benefit the greater norm, then we're being detrimental to the built environment that's already there. And that weighs in on how I'm going to present my argument to the rest of the commission.
I think that's a very good call. I know that honestly, there's so many answers to that, and I just part of my job is helping us work through that with tenants. And we do provide case management services. We do connect with other services in the community. We work directly with a program called RAPS, which is Wraparound and Prevention Service, Recovery and Prevention Services. So we actually are engaged with and have a lot of services available. Do we ever have a bad tenant? Yes. And there are times we work with them. Our goal is to help them figure it out. And if they can't, we remove them. And
Sure.
I do appreciate those people that call in. But so I can give you a list if it's really, if it is relevant to this meeting. I am happy to give more in depth, because we have like a child and family specialist that works specifically with the kids, especially since this is a school-based project. We have help with life skills, from teaching people to make sure they understand what the expectations of living in a community, or keeping your house clean, or parenting, or financial management. We have those courses available. We have people that visit people in their homes. We have employment specialists that help people get employed. The RAPS program helps people with chemical dependency issues. We have a security guard that we just hired so that we can have a visible presence on some of our sites, just so it can be a deterrent. And we often encourage our own tenants, although it's kind of backfiring, to call the police, and we have a good relationship with the police department, just so that there are records if things are not going right, and we can use that to remove tenants that aren't working. So these are all services we have available. Do you want me to go on more in depth?
Well,
no.
Well, I think
This
that
is
would
Dave.
be. Go ahead.
No, don't go on. This is ridiculous. If anybody in the city of Everett or the county should know what Housing Hope does and the work that they've done for decades, it should be our historical commission. So that's the end of my
Sure,
remarks.
Dave. But Dave, we're asking to open Pandora's box and reverse a historic overlay. So we need to be very sure that this site specific is the best area for this, decision.
You know who's going to decide that? The city council.
Well, it's our job to ask the question, Dave.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get the questions from Arnold, Dave. We'll get down on the list, but I do want to mention that from the city's perspective, we do not distinguish who the tenants are. So we don't distinguish if this is you could just consider this a multifamily project. Sure. So really what we're talking about is a multifamily project and removing the historic overlay, and who the client is and who the tenants are not part of our decision-making process here.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. Dave, over and over, people have said that it's for homeless students. So we've talked about the tenants repeatedly.
The applicant has talked about it. The city has said that's part of their thing. That's how they got the property from the school district. That's how they have that kind of deal. But again, we don't treat the zoning that way. This would be considered a multifamily project and single family units, and compliance with zoning from that perspective.
Thank you.
Arnold, do you have more questions?
No, I'm good.
Things?
I'm good.
Okay. So I think Patrick was next on my list.
Thank you, Dave. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a statement that I wrote the other day, just because it helps me to think a little bit better about this. So if you'll indulge me for 3 or 4 minutes. Ellen Giffen used to say that the fundamental problem in urban planning is that people want progress but fear change. The residents of the Norton-Grand historic overlay are very, very afraid of change. But change is affecting all of us in Everett, regardless of whether we live in a historic district or not. Our city, along with the entire region, is heavily impacted by growth, including a growing homeless population, and there's really nothing that we on the Historical Commission can do to stop that. Those of us who attend preservation conferences and keep up in the field know that historic preservation is about change management, not about change prevention. It's about revitalizing communities. And let's face it, if it isn't about that, then why would we do it? It's our responsibility in this commission to recommend insightful ways to manage change from a preservation point of view. And I would argue that if it's not directly related to preservation, then it's really more for the Planning Commission than it is for us. Back in February, I read a quote to the commission that has become my guiding principle in preservation, and one that was written with this specific situation in mind. It was written by a national leader in the field, Patrice Fry. She's the CEO of the National Main Street Center, which is part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. She says that being an effective preservationist means understanding that our efforts to save buildings are woven into a complex tapestry of other important social needs, including, but not limited to, affordable housing, economic and social equity, economic development, and climate change. Insisting on an uncompromising approach to heritage conservation, particularly in instances in which the buildings in question are not resources of singular historic value, makes it very easy to cast preservationists as unreasonable and out of touch. That reputational issue undermines broader work to save places by alienating those who might share a common cause with the preservation movement. So preservation is about revitalizing entire communities, not just a small subset. It doesn't promise to preserve the lifestyle of existing owners. It is not intended to be a bastion against density, insulation from the effects of growth experienced by the rest of us, or assurance that you never have to live next to people that are different from you. Yet in planning commissions and city councils across America, organized residents of historic single-family neighborhoods consistently invoke preservation laws to carve out exclusionary zoning for themselves with devastating effects on affordability and livability for the community at large. As a result, preservation has come to be seen by many as the province of the privileged and the enemy of social equity. This stereotype results in the weakening of preservation laws and the weakening of historical commissions, as I believe is happening right now in Everett. Furthermore, there is now a growing movement to ban single-family zoning altogether at the state level. Last year, the city of Minneapolis eliminated single-family zoning from its code, and Oregon became the first entire state to do the same. There's already a movement afoot to do the same in California and here in Washington. This could well be the result of movements such as this one. So when deciding how much of a threat this development would be, again, from a preservation point of view, I urge you to ask yourself the following questions. 1, would these residents have the exact same objection to this development if it didn't happen to be in a historic neighborhood? 2, while this open field might be a good place to walk your dog, does it actually have any significant historical value to preserve? 3, is this neighborhood truly under threat, and is anybody planning a demolition of a historic structure? 4, would the opposition of this development increase or decrease the reputation of historic preservation among the larger community? And 5, would the absence of this development result in a revitalized community, which is the ultimate goal of historic preservation? I will let you answer these questions for yourselves. So now on to my personal opinion. Generally, I would say that I would be extremely reluctant to advocate for any kind of reduction in a historic overlay zone, but I think there are some extenuating circumstances here. One of them is that the property is on the very edge of the overlay zone, it's not in the middle. Another is that there's nothing on the land and hasn't been for 80 years. I also think that Housing Hope has gone to a great deal of trouble to be as compatible as possible with the spirit of the overlay. I am sympathetic to the fact that, existing neighbors might not approve of how their lives may change as a result of this change, but I personally believe that that's more of an issue for the Planning Commission. that's not directly related to preservation. And I personally, I am against the use of preservation laws for anything other than preservation, for the reasons I stated before. And so personally, I think that I would, I would support changing the overlay given these extenuating circumstances. That's it for me.
Thank you, Patrick. I got Tom. Tom, do you have?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, thank you. So I think I just have a couple questions. So, I am curious about why the this area was, so it sounded like the area was amended and this field was included. So I'm kind of curious as to kind of, I guess, the decision making, maybe if there's some history from some of the other commission members, what kind of went into that decision. I just heard briefly a comment about essentially creating a buffer for some of the historic houses that are already in the neighborhood. And that was why they wanted to kind of pursue that as a way to protect kind of that. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It's just kind of a question. I'm kind of curious about the history of why it was added. So maybe if there's other comments, maybe someone could touch on that. But I think my main question is, so we're really talking about at the heart of the issue of removing this area from the historic overlay. And so it was brought up that the reason to do it was, some people are kind of alluding to that to get this project done or get it into the area, but it seems like they need the overlay removed just specifically because of the height issue. So I guess my comment would be, if that is true, if it's just purely because of the height issue that can't be remedied, that doesn't seem like on its own a good merit to remove a historic overlay. It seems like there would be opportunities to be able to fit something into this within all of the historic overlay guidelines, unless there's something about density or multifamily housing that I'm missing. So I guess that's a question to you, Dave. Is this just purely based on the height issue, or are there other issues like density and multifamily housing that's driving it, the need to remove it?
No, from what is in front of you folks for the historic overlay, there's no issues of density. They're asking for a comprehensive plan and rezone amendment to get to R3 for this portion of property, but that's a separate conversation with the Planning Commission. That's what it helps them achieve some additional density, but that's not tied to the historic overlay. Quite a few areas within the Norton-Grand historic overlay are zoned R3 already, so that's not uncommon. But I think that it's both the overall height, the eave height, and honestly, if you look at the design guidelines, they're just not meant for these larger structures. I think you had a building in the Grand Historic District recently where you kind of wrestle with the same thing of trying to use historic guidelines that were never really built for multifamily structures. And so it's a challenge one way or the other of how you do that review as part of it. But those are the only things that come to mind right now.
Okay. And that's really all I had. I think that's my general comment there is, I guess the reasoning to remove the overlay. It seems to me like there would be opportunities to work within the guidelines, especially for the value given the property and things like that, and being able to work within it. There's other benefits in there, I think, to make it kind of work out. But that's what I have.
All right, I got two historic commission members that are just calling in by phone. I got Dave Ramstad. Dave.
Thank you, David. Two of my most powerful emotional drives are getting children into safe housing and preserving historic properties. I was overjoyed to be invited to join the Community Advisory Council for this project, and I've served there, and I hope I made some modest contribution. The situation is children need to be in houses to build strong future citizens for our country, and I'm in favor of this. And I think this is a really beautiful solution, a really elegant solution to the situation that Housing Hope has brought to us here, with much contribution from citizens. I was there, I saw it, and I hope they continue to use community advisory groups for future projects. wonderful scheme. This is an elegant plan. I'm in favor of the zoning change. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dave. And then Jack O'Donnell. Jack?
Hey, David, Jack's calling me. He got cut off.
Okay. Is he not on the line right now?
No, he's on my phone.
He's on. Does
Wait,
he
wait a
need the
second.
link?
Here, say that again.
And so can I just talk through you?
Can you hear him through my phone?
We can hear him. Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. You can hear me?
Yes, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, they can hear you.
All right. I just want to say that the Housing Hope should be commended for their work on the Commerce Block, National Register property. There are merits to this to fit in, but my sympathies are with the neighbors, the people who have put their money down and their commitment to their historic homes. And this is a neighborhood under threat with a project like this. These people went to a lot of work to join Norton-Grand Avenue that I lived in for a house in it for over 40 years. And during that time, two housing projects were welcome to the neighborhood. But I do know from living on the overlay that we were threatened because we couldn't get any kind of a anti-barrier to development. We wanted some kind of a transition zone, and that wasn't going to come. This is already giving up the transition zone by changing this. I think it's a very bad idea to downzone or upzone rather property, and I'll be voting no. And if I get cut off again, I just want to record my no vote. That's all.
All right, Steve, I think we got through all the commission members, so the only one that hasn't said anything is yourself so far.
So they're going on to Steve.
Okay.
Does Jack need the link sent to him again, Andrea, to join on?
I'll ask him. He's still. Do you, Jack? Do you want the link sent to you?
Would that get me back on my phone?
Yeah, it would. That would get him back on, right? I do mine on the computer. So.
Yes. Can you send him the link, or do I need to do that?
I don't. Well,
He just needs a phone number, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have that handy right now.
Well,
okay.
I can look it up on my email.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, I think I see it here. All right. I'll try.
Okay, he's trying it now. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
All right, Steve.
Okay, thank you, David. Yes, I have some comments and questions. First of all, this is the first time the Historic Commission has officially heard of this project, and I'm feeling a little bit rushed. Because normally it seems like we would have some kind of the month before some kind of a presentation that would explain what the applicant's doing. Maybe that's just me, but I just thought I would throw that out. Next time this sort of thing happens, maybe we could have a little more time to study the project. Anyway, and I also realize it's hard we're not meeting face to face during this pandemic, and it makes this whole process difficult. I do appreciate the good homework that Housing Hope has done, trying to do the best they can with this project. And I'm glad to see that the Historic Commission would be involved if this got approved. After all, this neighborhood is 120 years old in this area. And the Jackson School was built way back in 1902. And if this project were to go through, I would love to see a plaque at least to show what used to be there in 1902, the Jackson School. I also realized that park space is precious. I was on a recent trip to Portland. Portland's got so many more parks. It's a city of parks, and it really helps the neighborhood character. I think although this is not an official city park, it does really affect the neighborhood character. I also realized that the high density homeless project can be upsetting to neighbors. I'm not sure that's part of the Historical Commission's purview. We need to lift people out of poverty to become citizens who can appreciate our fine city. And the density is somewhat hidden behind the Grand Avenue trees if they remain. I do also have a problem with, right now those trees that are there would block the buildings from Grand Avenue well, but I struggle to see how you're going to keep very many of those trees. And as you can see, I'm struggling with all of this because I see pluses and minuses to everything. I guess my biggest problem is the precedence that we would be setting to reduce a historic overlay that was pretty carefully done. I don't know, 20 years, whenever it happened. I wasn't here back then on the commission. I do have a comment about the view from Norton Avenue. We had a similar project on Virginia Avenue that really bothered me because they're putting up a multi-story garage/house structure behind a one-story house. I was really concerned after looking at the pictures that it would dominate the streetscape, but actually it doesn't because of the angle of view. If you're standing on the near side sidewalk, the house in the front really does block a lot of what you see behind. If you're standing across the street, you can see more of the building, but it still blocks more than you would think from pictures. I personally was surprised by that. However, this is a lot of density to put in this neighborhood. I think if this project were to go forward, it's absolutely critical that the houses 1 through 6 be at the sidewalk level. But not only that, in historic neighborhoods, the vast majority of houses are raised up a couple of steps. Most houses of that era had a front porch 2 or more steps above ground level. It really helps reduce the massing of what would be behind it. It invites you to step up onto the porch and enter the house. The houses of that era were not built on slab foundations. And I know that we're not supposed to be reviewing this stuff, but how do you review this without considering what's going to be replacing the park area? I had a minor comment on the staggered houses. I don't think that's necessary. Most of Everett doesn't have staggered houses, although that neighborhood does across the street, but that's a minor point. Won't belabor that. The chain link fences that were mentioned, I hope they come up with something more beautiful than that. It looked like on the pictures that the houses were about 45 feet apart. I don't know if that is intentional, but I guess I'm okay with that. I guess, but I'm really struggling after making all those comments with the precedence of removing a portion of a historical overlay. And that pretty much concludes my comments. I guess we ought to go through the commissioners. Well, do we have any more questions for the applicants first of all? From commissioners?
No.
Do we want any more discussion?
Might consider someone putting a motion forward one way or the other to get the discussion going to the next level.
I guess I'll jump in. I will raise a motion. How should I phrase this? To grant the applicant's request to reduce the historic overlay by the area shown on the map.
I didn't believe we were voting on this tonight.
I think the intention is that we do provide a recommendation to the Planning Commission tonight, Dave?
Only on the zoning change.
That's correct.
This project will come back to us in due time for review of the entire project. That's why I was a little concerned about the excess digging into the background of this thing, is that we're just dealing with the change in the historic overlay border now. And like I said, I'm much in favor of it.
So, Dave, that was the motion, was to remove the historic overlay for the portion requested by Housing Hope.
I guess that's I would amend that to say it's a recommendation, since I guess is that technically us that does that, or is the Planning Commission do that?
The City Council does it. So your recommendation goes to the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission goes to City Council. Yes.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Yes.
I'll second it.
All right,
if I could,
do we have any comments from commissioners, discussion on this motion?
Steve, if I could get clarification, because in the staff report, we also talked about the development agreement. Does Patrick, does your motion include requiring the development agreement for coming back through the Historic Commission for review?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I second that too.
All right, any comments from commissioners before we go to a vote?
I just want to comment, this is Amy, that this is the type of project that I would very much be in favor of. I think the precedent that a developer won't or can't comply with the historic overlay, so we reduce the overlay, is a really bad precedent. So I just want to clarify that I think it's a false choice between being in favor of housing homeless kids, which, yeah, let's do that, and needing to reduce the overlay in order to meet that goal. That's my comment.
Kids come first. Amy, kids come first.
I don't disagree. I don't think that's the question before us.
I think in my mind, the difference is that I think this is a very unusual situation and that there's actually nothing on the land. I think if we were talking about a demolition, you know, it would be another matter. I think it's also unusual in that it's at the very edge of the overlay, and it wouldn't be something that carves a chunk out of the middle. To me, that matters. I understand if it doesn't to everybody else. And so to me, I think that that's not as much of a strong precedent as it may look on the surface.
Is it uncommon to have open space and historic overlays?
I don't know that it's uncommon. I mean, I'm not sure that. Well, the Grand Avenue Park, I think, is in the historic overlay, the overlook. I'm not totally positive about that, but we probably have some of that already.
Patrick, I would just say in response to your comment, I don't think we can control how precedent would be set or used here. I think the precedent that we would be setting is that we can reduce what is already pretty limited in terms of historic overlay.
Jack also has a comment. Good, Jack.
When I lived in that neighborhood, I was in the middle of the overlay, but also on the edge. I was on an alley, but anybody would say I was right in the middle of it. So I think anything that's in the overlay is important, and to reduce it in size, I think it's a bad precedent. It doesn't.
Yep.
May I say something?
Yes, Dave.
I'd like to say that often in the past and over my entire tenure on the commission, we've discussed enlarging historical overlay districts. And in fact, my dream of the future is virtually all of North Everett will be one historical district. I see that coming long after I'm dead, and you are too. But if we can discuss without contention or worry that we could expand some of our historical neighborhoods because the houses are getting older steadily with each year, then why can't we discuss reducing? I don't see the difference there. It's an adjustment to match changes in culture and population and American customs.
I've got another comment I'd like to make. If, I guess, two-part comment. First part is, what if some other developer came in and wanted to do exactly the same thing, and it was not for Housing Hope, but it was just a general developer putting in buildings? I really suspect we would not allow that. And now, what was my second question? Well, maybe it'll come back.
Steve, you already answered that when you said before, we need to help our citizens who are in trouble get up into the middle class. You know, basically that's what this is about. And I think there would be variances for that purpose, for the good of the city.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying,
Talking
Dave.
about the residents. Again, we're going back to who the residents are, and Dave Stahlheim has told us over and over again, it's not about the residents.
I suspect if a general developer came in and just put up the same buildings, they'd have a hard time convincing the city, the historical commission, the planning commission, and the city council to reduce to change that eastern portion to R3.
I agree. And I wouldn't be willing myself.
I remember the second part of my question. If for some reason Housing Hope were to fail as an organization, and these buildings basically went on the market, because I'm sure the school district wouldn't tear them down. Maybe the school district would sell them. I don't know. Then it's not really part of what we envision with these historic overlays.
I call for the vote.
Any more comments from commissioners? All right. Guess it's time to vote.
Do you want me to go down the list and ask people's vote, Steve?
Yes, that would be best.
Okay. Amy?
I vote against reducing the overlay.
Yeah, so clarification, yeah, that's good. This is based on Patrick's motion to reduce the overlay and have a development agreement. So that's the motion on the table. So Andrea?
I vote to not reduce the overlay.
Patrick,
Yes.
Jack. Is Jack on the line?
No.
Dave Ramstad,
Yes.
Arnold,
Against reducing the overlay.
Tom,
I vote against.
and Commission Chair Steve.
I vote against this motion.
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 against and 2 in favor. So the motion fails.
So we need another motion if we want to give a recommendation to Planning Commission.
Sure. I would like to motion that we recommend to the Planning Council that we do not reduce the historic overlay.
A second.
So we're going to be voting for this motion. So yes means you agree with what Tom said in his
Correct.
motion.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Okay, so go back through Amy,
Aye, in favor.
Andrea,
Yes.
Patrick,
No.
Jack,
Yes.
Dave, Dave Ramstad, Dave, we can't hear you. Arnold,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
Okay, so I haven't heard from Dave, but that motion passes. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 votes in the affirmative. Did I count that right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes in the affirmative. I'm sorry.
So I have one further comment on this subject, and that is, does a member of the commission, would they be willing to write a letter to the Planning Commission explaining why we voted the way we did? Because I don't think the motion really describes it that well.
I can, or I can collaborate with somebody.
Okay, Amy, thank
I'll
you.
help as well. I'll help Amy.
Cool.
So that letter would be from you. It can't be from the commission, but I think you could word it such that this is what I heard at the commission, and this is why the commissioners voted the way they did. But the letter's from you and not from the commission, because I believe we're not allowed, David, we're not allowed to email each other as a group.
Correct. That would be considered a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. So please don't share. If Amy and Tom do this, have the conversations between yourself, and it represents your folks' observations of what you heard at the meeting, and just represent it that way and pass it on. But once you have it, then we can share it with everybody, but no edits or meetings as part of that.
So essentially a joint letter from Amy and I summarizing what the Historic Commission decided and why.
Yeah, I think 2 of you, I think it's okay because it's not a quorum of the commission. So it's okay for 2 of you to talk together about that.
Okay, I guess that's the end of the Housing Hope portion of the agenda. We do have another item that is very timely that we need to talk about, and that's what Dave Koenig brought up. And also we got some letters from Mary Cunningham and another person whose name escapes me at the moment. But David, as staff, could you please comment on the items that were brought up there, please?
Well, there was quite a few comments that were brought up. The things that are pertinent to Historic Commission, there was some conversation about things that are in Title II, Chapter 2.96 about Historical Commission. Some things that are actually more in Title 15 for local project review procedures about notice for projects. These are all things that and Karen's still on the line here. So Karen has brought these things to the commission in the past. I'm not sure if the Title 15 local project review procedures were, but Karen brought the Title II and the historic resource chapters to the commission last year. Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 3 different times, 3 meetings.
That's correct. Starting in November of last year. This is Karen Stewart on staff.
So I think of the different things that, so Dave has a lot of comments that the Planning Commission is reviewing and staff is responding to, and we'll be sending those to the Planning Commission with respect to, different things in historic or local project review procedures, things like that. So I would probably raise a couple things that are really more substantive that might be good for the commission to kind of think about and weigh in on. One is as we dug into, or as I looked at Dave's recent letter that he sent in, there was a change in the procedures that has the demolition of a building on the historic register, as Dave noted. Right now, it goes from the Historic Commission to City Council in a public meeting. The change is that it goes to the Planning Director. The City Council typically doesn't get involved in site-specific decisions like that, and so we felt that it was appropriate to take that out of there. And so that's one change that that's there that is a little bit more substantive. It's, once you're on the register, if you did demolition of that, and that's an observation there. The second is actually about local project review procedures, and Dave and I are going to disagree on this about public notice, and our staff and our staffing levels are down 5 people. Karen is, after I retire in another 10 weeks, Karen is going to be the only long-range planner for the city of Everett, and she does half of her time doing historic preservation review. So we've lost 5 FTEs in the last 5 years alone, and so our ability to continue to do project reviews is greatly limited these days. What we did is we took a subset of projects that were really, in our opinion, based on some internal review, that we felt were small projects, things like accessory dwelling unit in the backyard, things like you changing out your windows in a historic house. We felt that those projects still needed to meet historic design guidelines, and they still needed review by the Historic Commission, but that they didn't need to notify, and this is an increased distance, 500 feet. The distance is 500 feet for notice for these types of projects, and posting of the signs for those. So there were some comments that the notices as part of building public education and historic preservation. I greatly respect that. I think that has a lot of merit to that. But we also hear on the staff level complaints about the timeliness of getting through reviews for small projects and things that are going on as a result of that. And public education shouldn't necessarily be through regulation of some of these smaller projects. So So we did not amend any of the standards whatsoever. As Karen drafted that section, all the standards remain the same, but there is a difference in notice procedures, and so the whole neighborhood within 500 feet isn't notified of those smaller projects. Bigger projects still get notified, so the bigger, any of the multifamily projects, commercial projects, things like that still would get notified as part of that. So I think those are two of the really a little bit more meatier things. And I think Dave is still on the line. So if I'm missing some other ones, and I'm sure I probably am, but he'll chime in.
And Chair Fox, this is Karen Stewart. Could I have a moment to respond to a couple of items that Dave Koenig in his letter from yesterday brought up?
Yes, please.
Okay. So one of the things you may remember when we were reviewing the rethink zoning and how historic resources would be addressed was the shuffling of sections between Title II, which creates the commissions, like the Planning Commission. There's other, like the Parks Board. Well, in 2.96, that's the creation of the Historical Commission. And it wasn't titled Historical Commission, it was titled Historic Resources. So what we were trying to do was make the code more parallel. So in looking at Title II, just focusing the purpose on the Historical Commission is what happened there. And then Title 19.28 was retitled Historic Resources. So there was a lot of moving of text. And then, so I do understand the request for the legislative version. And I did earlier on create a legislative version, but because of moving of major sections, it was a little complicated. So you have to look at the two chapters together. And then the other thing that was brought up in Dave's comments, and just sort of going through that, the bottom of the first page, he talks about the purpose, and there's items like aesthetics, economics, education, and heritage that were in a very long purpose section. And you'll notice the purpose for the historic resources section has been dialed down to talking about more of the regulatory mechanisms is the focus there. So I would suggest that if there's some text in this section that is very important to the commission, that perhaps that wording we should double check. Perhaps it's already addressed in the comprehensive plan, because it's so broad and it's not specific really to the functions of the Historical Commission. Another comment is on page 2 of Dave's letter. He's referring to definitions that used to be in Title II. Again, we're just focusing on Title II, talking about the Historical Commission, the formation of the group. And so definitions such as, he pointed out, to district and incentives. So you'll notice in Rethink Zoning, there's a definition chapter, and that is described in the summary that I put together of what's happened with historic resources. So the word district actually now is titled Historic District, and it appears in Rethink Zoning chapter 19.04.130. And you'll notice in there that there's a whole section of historic definitions specific to historic resources. And in fact, staff added a definition for contributing structure. That doesn't appear in our current code right now, and was something that I thought was really important that we codify. So I know that's been added too. So district is still there, it's just called historic district, same definition. Then a question about what happened to incentives. If you read the definition that's in Dave's letter, it's generic until you get to the phrase may be authorized to grant or obtain for the owners of registered properties. So there it's customized to talk about historic registered properties. But if there's a common use of what do incentives mean for development proposals. So it's really, and certainly the city uses incentives and it is described in the code. So if the commission thought it was very important that the word incentive be described, which I don't think it is right now in the definitions, it could potentially be added to the general definitions section. But professionally, I really don't think that it's necessary because it's a commonly understood term. And the examples that are listed there are ones that we already use in historic districts and throughout the city, really. So then turning to the last page of Dave's letter, page 3, let's see. So it talks about 2 different sections related to, so it's actually in Title 2.96.040. The functions of the Historical Commission there are 16 of them, which is more than any of the other commissions. You should look through Title 2 and you'll see yours are a lot more detailed and specific. And in particular, the functions D, N, and P relate to some of the things that Dave is concerned about are no longer addressed, but they are. So I just wanted to direct your attention to that. And then then Dave also lists that the commission shall adopt rules of procedure. Well, we already have those rules of procedure, so I don't see that those would go away. And then let's see. I guess that's my last comment there, since David Stahlheim already talked about changes to procedures. I didn't actually write those sections directly myself. So I'll pause there. Did that make sense to you? Does anybody have any questions about, and I guess Dave Koenig, if you've got some questions about my verbal responses to your points you raised?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And you can hear me right now? Okay.
I can, yes.
Okay. The main issue I had was the reduction in notice, and as David Stahlheim mentioned, he disagrees on that. That's fine. I just think I have a belief that citizens who live in a neighborhood and knows what's going on in a neighborhood have value in their comments, and there has been a lot of turnover in staff, and so a lot of the staff are new to the city. A lot of them don't live in the city, aren't familiar with the city, and so I think it's actually an important part of citizens being able to educate staff as they get more experience working with things. And so I really think public notice should not be changed, and that's on a number of things in my other notes too. On the purpose, I think it's important to have something that says, when you become a new commission member, what are the purposes of the commission? What are we trying to do? And I think the purpose that's in the note that's taken right out of the code gives an idea. And that's, same thing with the definitions. It's an educational thing that's important. And if I just looked up district and didn't see there, I didn't look at historic district. So, but again, there isn't a legislative format, so you have to take the two things and look at them together. The going to city council and not going to city council, I think the main thing on that is city council places things on the historic register. It's not done administratively. So it's an action by the legislative body. And so in Seattle for landmarks, which would be a similar thing as the historic register, that still goes to the Seattle City Council. It's an action that they've done. And so there's a legislative history there, and there's reasons why it was put on. And then administratively having a planning director do that without a public hearing, I think that's the issue I see there. Again, it's done in somebody's office, in the quiet of the room, and it's not done with a public meeting, which the historic register original property is put on. So I didn't put a recommendation there because I didn't know where the direction was this coming from. This does put a lot of political pressure on the city council for certain things. When the event center was built in Everett, there was some Everett Register properties, and the commission had to review those, and city council had to act on it, and it put them into a limelight. And so I thought maybe some of the city council members were saying, "Oh, we don't want to deal with that anymore." But I think there's a good reason for it, since it's originally a legislative action, and where somebody's applied. It's also, I think, important that all the Everett Register is by volunteer. I mean, the property owner has to agree in the first place. So things change over time, I understand, but it also then there's a contract between the city and the person related to that Everett Register. So I'm not sure if a planning director can void a contract that was approved by city council. So anyway, that'd be something for the legal to look at too, because there is a requirement for a contract between the property owner and such. So anyway, I'll stop there, and I recognize the comments that were brought up, but I got involved because I got involved with rethink zoning and the elimination of notice for some other projects. I don't think the notice takes that much time to do. Take a lot of time for doing long-range planning, but I don't see doing plans and such. But I don't see where that is an issue here. So I mean, if that's in the notices.
I have a question, or maybe a quick comment. I know that we've had a lot of turnover and reduction in staff. I hope it's not permanent, but we might be permanently baking into the code some of these changes, especially on the notice, when we might have additional staff that could easily handle it. Maybe easily is not the right word. I know it's a lot of work. I really appreciate all that work, but I'm a little concerned about baking into the code something that may be temporary.
Well, I don't think that the issue is temporary. That's not the reason for this. So getting a lot of feedback all of a sudden, not sure where that's coming from, but for example, I mean, let's just talk about modification of a historic building. I mean, again, there are standards, there's staff, and there's historic commission review. And so if you have an existing building and you want to do a modification to that or do a small addition to that, you review it against the standards in place, the code that's in place, and you have some of the expertise of the historic commission to review that. I'm not sure that there's, I fail to really understand why people within 500 feet need to be notified about a change to your house. I'm not getting that. So,
well, you're looking at that house. I mean, if it's external, you're looking at it every day. You walk out your front door.
Yeah, so everyone within 500 feet, but so it's being reviewed by staff and it's being reviewed by the historic commission for compliance with the guidelines.
Right.
Is this really a neighborhood conversation that really needs to happen as part of that? That's part of the kind of the underlying question as part of this.
It has been in the past. I don't see why. I also agree. I don't see why we need to change that. Yeah.
I have a few comments, if I may.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, first of all, just keep in mind that Everett is a certified local government. That's one thing that makes our commission different, maybe, is that there are certain state and maybe federal, I'm not sure, requirements to meet to be a certified local government. And I wonder if that's where some of those 16, purposes or whatever came from. But I think whatever changes that are made to the charter of the commission, I think that we have to make sure that we are still complying with the requirements to be a CLG. The other comment I have is that as far as the Everett Register and requiring approval by the city council versus the planning director, this one is major. Right now, the Everett Register is the only one of the 4 different historical registers that has any teeth in it, for that reason that it actually does have to go to the city council. There have been plenty of times in the past when the city council has voted to demolish, so it's not like you can't demolish something. But that level of scrutiny is absolutely necessary. And I think if that were taken out, I personally would view that as a full frontal attack on historic preservation, and I would very vocally oppose that. So that's my thoughts on that.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? What do we want to do about this? Is there a motion that someone wants to make, or I mean, because I think this is going to, well, David, remind me of the steps. It's going to planning commission, this rethink zoning. There's some public review coming up. I've forgotten now.
Yeah, the planning commission had a public hearing on this last week, actually, but the written record's open until September 8th, which at that point they are prepared to make a recommendation to city council. So yeah, so anything that you guys have to pass along would be timely right now.
Yeah, we have very little time. Yeah, till September 8th.
Patrick, can you write a letter?
When is it due again?
September 8th. Never mind.
I will probably collaborate with somebody else, but you have no idea what else I'm working on right now, but yes.
Patrick, are you aware that Dave Koenig was a planner here and one of our 3 people from the city staff that came to all our historical commissions several years ago?
I'm aware that he was a planner. The rest I didn't know.
Yeah, so he's very knowledgeable. He's got a lot of history going way back. So maybe he could help you a little bit.
That sounds like a good idea.
He knows the system inside and out, at least as of what, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
5.
I'm ancient. I'd be happy if you, Patrick, I'd be happy to work with you.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess the point of order, I'm curious, is this going to be a letter just from a couple individuals, or are you trying to put together comments from the historical commission? So do we need to try to set up a special meeting for that before September 8th?
Yeah, that's going to be difficult, huh?
That's a good question. I mean, is it the kind of thing that we did for the earlier motion where the commission authorizes somebody to speak? I don't know. How do we do that?
Well,
mean,
not
Dave-
if you're having Dave Koenig help
Yeah.
prepare the letter, because he's not on the historical commission.
Well, it wouldn't be signed by him, I think.
You can't represent the historical commission without the historical commission seeing what you're representing. So you have to do that in an open meeting. So if you do something, it would be signed as an individual that happens to be on the historic commission.
You know, we could have a motion, vote on it, and then you could have your explanatory letter, kind of like Amy's going to do for Housing Hope Project.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to suggest.
So it would be from you, not from the
From me,
commission.
yes. Unless any other commissioners, a minority of other commissioners wanted to sign on to that.
I'd be willing to help a little bit. I've got a lot going on at the moment too. But I can help you at least review the letter if you like.
Okay, thank you. So how do we do this? What kind of motion do we need?
Well, Patrick, what you spoke to was the issue of the demolition and that going to city council. So you might want to start with just that issue.
Yeah, definitely.
Do we want a motion about the review process or the notices that Dave Koenig brought up?
You know, I personally don't feel like I'm qualified to address that one because it's a complex issue that I'm not familiar with. I'm much more familiar with the other issue about the Everett Register and the requirements of the register and the value of it.
So I guess we're not hearing any motion. Maybe we can encourage people to write letters to the Planning Commission, just explaining how they feel about this.
Yeah, that might be a better idea, or, you know, speak at their meeting.
So Patrick, why don't you do the motion on the on your issue about the demolition then?
Question real quick. So, but they're not having another meeting, right? The planning commission is done with their public meeting, right? So it would just be a letter. We couldn't speak there. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, their oral comments are done, but they'll take in written comments.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm confused now. What's the difference between me just writing a letter and us taking a motion on something? I kind of don't understand that.
Well, if the commission has a vote and a motion on an issue, as staff will parlay that back to the planning commission that says the historic commission took a position on X.
Okay.
And then you can fill in background in terms of more reasoning and stuff like that if you wanted to.
Okay. Well, I think what I can do is I can raise a motion to formally oppose the proposal to allow demolitions to be approved by the planning director rather than the city council for his Everett Register properties.
Do we have a second?
Okay, a second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
We don't have a lot of the public on, so we could probably just do everyone call out for a vote. So anyone, how about, is anyone opposed to it? You can speak out. We'll go with opposed. Okay, people in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So it sounds unanimous to me.
Yes, unanimous.
Okay.
All right. Is there?
And then it
this is-
sounds like I'm agreeing to explain that decision to the planning commission,
Yes.
addressed from me and from personally and not from the commission.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and Patrick, if you need to, again, we'll pass this on and stuff like that. We'll probably include it in our package of amendments that would go forth to the planning commission. So if
Okay.
you're feeling stressed by other workload stuff, I don't think this is a big issue. So.
Okay.
It's nice to have that background. You speak real eloquently to these reasons, so it's nice to have that. So if you do have the time, I would. It would be great, but
Okay.
I don't want to put pressure on you.
No, this is something I would write a letter about. I would do that.
Okay.
Karen, do you have any
you.
opposition to staff supporting that?
I'm not really sure. I don't have an opinion on it. I didn't write that section, so I don't know.
Yeah. This is just about demolition, and the current process goes to city council, so it would keep the current process in place. So I feel fine with that.
All right. So do we? This has been a really long meeting. I appreciate everybody's stamina tonight. I'm kind of thinking that's enough, but does anybody have anything that's urgent? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you all very much. That was a long one.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
See ya.
Bye now.